the dream that you have on your heart as a listener, or create something you want to create, that is absolutely possible for you, no matter what you think. If there's some doubt or concern in your mind if it being possible, that's okay, but it doesn't take away the actual truth of your nature that you can create whatever you want. And that goes back to what we've been speaking about this entire conversation, that we are intelligent, whether we realize it or not. Our body's intelligent. And when we start to work with how life works, how our body works, how our mind works, and get past our own, limitations, what we impose on ourselves, then there is this force of life, this energy of life that comes through you.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day, listeners. This is CJ Miller, your host for the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It is actually a cool day here in Dallas, which is very time of the year, so I'm enjoying it. I had my show opening this weekend, and I have no paintings behind me, as you can see, which means that everything is out and on display at the Eisman Center in Richardson, Texas. Stop by and see it. So it's so nice to get back into my podcast, and I will tell you, listeners, that I am working on a workbook to go with my book on asemic drawing, and I'm looking for this guy to give me some inspiration on the body and how it works. But let me introduce you to transformational life coach Kevin Carton. He is an inspirational speaker, teacher, and life coach certified by the Brave Thinking Institute. He empowers people to discover and live their soul's purpose. With over a decade of experience, Kevin has helped hundreds of people break through limitations, rewire their subconscious mind, and trust themselves more deeply so they can take the bold steps to turn their dream into a reality. Recently, I was on his podcast with his brother. He shares weekly insights with his brother, Chris, on their podcast, Science and Spirituality, which I'm loving this, which has over 1.3 million downloads and listeners in 113 countries around the world. Good afternoon, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, CJ. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, I love having you on here. I want to jump right in because there's just so much to talk about. And I know we only have, 50 or so minutes, but let's talk about this first and foremost. The name of your podcast, which I love, and why, Science and Spirituality. Can you talk about that a little bit, about how you see those two converging?
Absolutely. So they often are seen as two different worlds, but as a scientist myself, I got my undergraduate degree as a bachelor's of science in pharmaceutical and healthcare studies. I had just this fascination with science from a very young age. Obviously, you got a 4-year degree for that. But after that, I started to have this spiritual awakening, a reconnection with knowing that I'm more than my thoughts, my physical body, even my name, that I'm a soul incarnated in this human experience. And that started to really interest me even more. And so these two worlds just blended together so well for me. And so as I studied, looked into the deeper meanings of both of these exact words, I really started to see a convergence, kind of like a Venn diagram. Like, there are pretty solid differences between the two, but there's this overlap of both that is it's becoming more and more real, or more and more proven nowadays with quantum physics. That's probably the greatest research in our modern science that starts to seep into spirituality, and then spirituality, of course, overlapping with science. But for me, the core of it comes back to just the origins of reality itself, which is kind of a big topic, right? But this is what really caught my attention the most, because if you look into any spiritual tradition, most people relate with religion, right? But I believe spirituality is even beyond the constructs of what people call as religion. But religion, whatever religion it is, usually is a pathway or way of helping a human get in touch with the divine part of themselves. But whatever point of view you look at with spirituality or religion, the origin of the universe comes from one source. Usually it's called God, but many people are now becoming more comfortable with say the universe, source, spirit, again, the creator, you may even say. But that is like the origin, like there is this creator. But science looks at it as like, oh, how could that be? That they're like nothing, like all of this was created from nothing, right? But if you look at the actual most highly accepted origin of the universe from the scientific point of view, it's the Big Bang. And the Big Bang is saying that it came from one infinitesimally small point of matter, and then it blew open to this whole thing that we call life itself or experience itself, the universe itself now. Which to me, it's like, well, how is that even possible? Well, science can't prove that right now. Exactly. That's why it's a theory, the Big Bang theory, but it's the most widely accepted one. And even that, it just correlates so well with the stories that are told within the spiritual community. So to me, they are hand in hand.
I love this because, and I asked the listeners to, there's such a or it's either I'm
Right.
spiritual or I'm scientific. Why can't you be both?
Yes.
And so I asked the listeners to, if you haven't considered that, if you're on one side of that or the other, to open up your mind and say, where are they the same, right?
Yeah. And if you ask that question, you will start to find evidence.
Right, right. And it's so funny how as humans, oftentimes people will get into their little place and they'll put their feet down and say, this is what it is. And we don't know.
Exactly. Right.
So I love that. When I went through spiritual training to be a life coach, we talked about quantum physics, and it really did shift me. It shifts in me to learn how to do prayer,
Mm,
is to realize that we are all connected. So the essence of my prayer is to remember, to help you remember that you are connected to all that is through that little tiny little thing that blew up. Once connected, we're always connected.
hmm And now
And
it's being
so,
proven.
yeah,
Like
scientifically.
exactly. Yeah. Quantum entanglement is probably the one piece of evidence that is just so powerful that if there are literally atoms that are, as they call, quantumly entangled. In other words, just meaning that they're so connected that no matter how far apart these atoms are, they literally are moved in the exact same way. If one atom is stimulated and rotated in a particular way, the other atom that is quantumly entangled with that atom will move in the exact same way instantaneously, even though it's across the world being observed by some other, scientific community. So like it just proves like, all right, if that's connected, there's got to be some underlying deeper connection within all things. I mean, that's the quantum field is often the term that's used in quantum physics, but it also is called the unified field theory. That everything is unified in a deep, deep level. This also goes with the with something called string theory. And again, it's funny to call it all theories, but like because like there's something that can't be technically proven with some of these things, but there's more evidence leaning toward this is real. It's just the solidification of that is on its way in the next decades.
Well, there's the theory. No.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I want to go back to that. So I want the listener, if you didn't, because I tend to take a little time to digest things. So
Sure.
I want them to revisit what you just said. What I heard you say, and it's when something is connected and when something is separated, it retains features of each other.
Yes.
Entanglement, right?
Yep.
And so think about that, listeners. If something pushes the one, even though they're separated by what we think is space, right? The other one reacts. And that's the theory when I do prayer for people.
Mm,
So if we're all one, I can hold healing for you. See, I can
100%.
hold healthy thoughts, healthy thinking, the blueprint of your perfection in my mind, and you will feel it.
Mm,
So I love how, and I love, so that's really a fascinating thing, right?
it is. It's beautiful too. It's quite a mystery in some ways as well. I think we're again getting more and more to unpacking what that mystery is. And again, it's really the basis of energy. The physics literally states this is a principle. It cannot be refuted that energy is, period. Energy is. And so energy cannot be created or destroyed is also the more frequently known principle in physics. But that speaks to it that if energy is, then there is this intrinsic connection with all energy. I mean, we're literally living in a sea of energy. Like you said, it seems like we're separate, but we're not at all in the term of energy. Because what we see is separation. Let's say the space between your camera and your face and my camera and my face, us talking here through this medium, and even the listener listening to the recording of this. It seems like there is space between all of this. But in that space is contained tons and tons and tons of energy that we can actually measure and pick up on. And so there's
Well,
this sea of energy that we're all connected with.
so Kevin, I want to go back to something you said right early on in there, which
Yep.
is energy cannot be taken away. Okay, so yesterday or a couple days ago, I did prayer for someone who had lost someone in their life. Uh, there was death in their family. And so I can pray to remind them
Mm,
energy is not, they're not lost. They've changed their form. They've transformed. So once we are, and that's a mighty thing to think about, right? Like
mhm.
if I'm here now, I can change form. I may not be this. I've already changed form a lot, but and I keep changing form, but we do, right? So the
Yes,
essence of us, the spiritual essence of us cannot be taken away.
exactly.
So,
100%.
so we could go on with this, but I wanted to talk because I love it. So let's talk about a little bit about the body, because that's
Mhm.
kind of why I wanted to pull you in on this and the scientificness of the body.
Right.
Um, I have done a lot with my art retreats and with spiritual practice to teach people about, for example, if we go and loosen up our bodies and then paint, we have a different experience. We can shift energy. So tell me a little bit about the body, and also I want to talk about the mental capacity. Like, does the body think? Can it think? Is there a
Mm.
brain in the body?
Yes, I personally believe so. And there's this is an interesting field of research that I think is still growing, but the subconscious mind. That's really the key when it comes to your question about does the body have intelligence or does it think? And then why does it happen where when you loosen up the body when you move that you are more creative, right? It's this intrinsic connection of mind body. We now have known this for decades, several decades actually, that there is a mind body connection. And it's become more popular in the last, say, 20, 30 years. But it was first starting to get the discovery in the 60s and 70s, but not very widespread that the mind has an effect on the body. But it's the same thing other way. The body has an effect on the mind because if they're that intrinsically connected, it has to be a two-way street. But the interesting thing, and this I actually learned from my brother, is we discussed when you were on our podcast that he mentioned this statistic from the Heart Math Institute that the body actually sends more information to the brain than the brain actually sends to the body. It's been scientifically proven that it's like I don't know the exact percentage, but when we think about our brain is extremely intelligent, 100 billion neurons firing and wiring together so perfectly that we live our life as if we're not even thinking sometimes, to be
Oh
honest.
yeah.
We're just living out our patterns, right? But all of that going down into our body, I mean, think about it. Our body is actually probably about 90% of our actual physical being. And so all of that information coming up to the brain, there's an intelligence in literally every single cell of the body. And I actually believe that every single cell of the body contains a, a microcosm of what is in the macrocosm of our entire body and brain. So every single cell, I believe, has that energetically because it's all connected, right? But in this one physical body that is one unit, you could say, one physical body, every single cell has the intelligence of the whole, in essence. And we know this. Think about this. When we're first conceived in our mother's womb, it is, two cells coming together, right? It's like the sperm and the egg. But when that first germinates, then it becomes two cells. That's it. That was the beginning of our nature. Two of the exact same cells. And then over time, it becomes this 100 trillion cellular being. How? How is that even possible? Well, I personally believe, and again, I believe that this research is coming out more and more that it's the subconscious. Our subconscious mind is way more powerful than our conscious mind. And I believe that our subconscious mind is literally within every single cell because how else would we even be able to form our body in the first place? I mean, of course, with the support of our mother, but that is something that came from within. It was nourished from without, of course, but it came from within. That spark of life itself came from our spirit, our soul, and then moved through the physical beingness of those individual cells in the beginning, and then so on and so forth to our full body.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? You know,
It's been
when you
fantastic.
when you describe that, I was thinking about what you said about the Big Bang, right? Because
Mm,
you talked about the cell, and he said the cell grows into a body, and I'm like a little thing could grow.
yes, I've never made that connection before, but that is exactly it.
Yes. And I love how you say it's a microcosm, right? So everything is macro is micro is in and on a smaller scale.
Hmm.
Um, it's amazing. So here's a question for you. Um, I do believe that our bodies have a lot of intelligence. I realized that I was when I first wrote my book, I focused on all mental, right? And then I do yoga. And anybody that does yoga on a regular basis, there's this amazing shifting of your state, of your emotions, even of your thoughts through your body. Like if you go in there and I give up control of my brain and I follow the instructor, stuff happens,
Yeah,
right? You know,
100%.
and it's usually through just movement, right? I'm just doing these movements. And so I started thinking, well, the body can heal the brain, you know? Because I
Mm,
would go in there, I might be all torn asunder, maybe a loss of someone in my life. And then I go in and I just do these motions. Suddenly I get clarity. I get
mm,
maybe come to peace or ground. But you know what's interesting? How the challenge is how do we read our body? So
mm,
um, I I have been struggling. I shared this with my listeners for the last couple years with psoriasis, which is a skin issue. So I
hmm.
feel like, well, my body's trying to tell me something.
Right.
But the question is, how do we understand what it's telling us?
That's a great question. And honestly, I've been inquiring that myself, to be honest. And that just brought my mind to a book that I've studied. And honestly, it's probably time to go back to it if it's popping in my mind now. But are you familiar with your, no, not Your Body Keeps the Score. That's another good
Uh,
book, but
it-
Heal Your Body, Heal Your Life by
yes, I actually
Louise
have.
Hay.
Yeah, I have a
Perfect.
copy. Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. It makes me think of Louise Hay's work because, I mean, just the way in which our body is organized can help us then think differently, feel differently, approach our life differently. But all these different physical symptoms are just manifestations of something going on internally, whether that's in the body or in our psyche. It's usually both. But my mentor would also put it this way, that our physical body expresses what's going on in our mental and emotional body. So it's like, as you actually mentioned this principle before, as within, so without.
Right.
You can even see yourself as, that again, a microcosm of that as within our own mind and emotions, as without in our body.
Right.
So yeah, it's a fascinating thing, but in terms of actually transforming states, that that I think is a journey for all of us, right? It's not like, oh, the awareness pops in, it's like, oh, I'm healed, I'm
I know.
good, unless you're
Okay.
Jesus.
It's like I hear you telling me this, but you got to write it down
Right.
because I'm not
Exactly.
saying. I'm like, what is it about my thoughts or whatever that might be contributing to this? You
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure about that. Let's talk. You shared this with me earlier. You talk about your heart. How does your heart tie into all of this?
Heart rate variability is the key. And this is, again, a study that was done, many studies by the Heart Math Institute. That it's why they term themselves that, Heart Math Institute, because they focused on the heart. But our heart is a very powerful force, you could say. I mean, in the energetic viewpoint of this, perception of this, our heart center, the heart chakra, is really actually the center of our being. I mean, it's actually where the studies show that it emanates our entire energetic field. This is where we have our electromagnetic energy field. The electric part comes from the electricity in our brain and the connections of our neurons, because that is literal electricity that you can measure. But then once we have a thought that's in harmony with our heart, or in other words, our emotion, then that takes on the magnetic component. And there's this magnetic pull from what our heart is tuned into, whether that's gratitude or whether that's hatred. Whatever state that we're in emotionally, then our heart tunes it to. And the more relaxed, more at peace, more happy, joyful, all these different emotions that are pleasant or comfortable to feel, that calms the heart. And then when we have a more uh, at ease or relaxed body, or in other words, heart rate variability is what they call it, It's like the heart rate is much more smooth. When we have that, then we have much more clarity of thinking as well. It's been well proven for that. So the more you can calm your body, calm your heart, then the better or the more clear your thinking will be, which actually you spoke to specifically with your yoga.
Yeah. So there is a scientific connection.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, which is funny. A lot of times people, especially if someone is an overthinker, they think a lot and they're up in their head a lot. You can't think yourself out of that. It's impossible because that's just more thought, right? It'll just continue spinning that exact same faculty, right? So instead of trying to figure it out, this quote, I actually want to honor one of my close friends and colleagues. Her name is Adelina Tanciocco. And this is her grandmother who gave her this teaching. And so she shared it with me, and I've been sharing it ever since. It says that instead of trying to figure it out, again, more thinking, we want to learn to listen within. Instead of figuring it out, we listen within. And listening within is actually a way of calming our body and really relaxing our mind through focuses on the body.
Oh, I love this. I love this. And it's daunting because I am one of those.
Same here.
I saw you staring at me when you said it. Some of us would think.
Yeah.
Some of us, but I do. And
Mm-hmm.
and I teach people when they do art, it's almost about stopping the brain. Like get out
Yes.
of the brain. Get out of the brain, you
Yeah.
know, and feel the hand, feel the brush, feel so and the paper, and you're out of your mind, literally out
Yes.
of your mind.
Literally.
But it is a challenge, isn't it? I mean, we so much, it's so quick to jump back into that mind.
100%. And I think that's just because of our upbringing, our conditioning, and the society we grew up in. Because our environment, especially our upbringing when we were young, this is actually also a scientific fact that from ages 0 to 7, our brain waves was in the alpha state. And alpha state is hypnosis. So like
To
literally from
seven till 7.
till 7 years old.
Wow.
Technically, our brain, not that kids are literally in hypnosis that like they have no thought themselves, like they do, but in general, it's hypnosis states of mind. So that what can we do? So we can learn and absorb everything to learn how to be human. So all of that was taken on. So from teachers, environment, again, parents or guardians, whoever was raising us, all of that is soaked in our mind. And so therefore it becomes the major programming or like the hardware to start out with. Like think about a computer. Like we have hardware and software.
Yeah.
Hardware is like it's hardwired in there and it's difficult to change that. You often do need to get a completely new computer if you want different hardware, right? Unless you're very tech savvy and can edit that and make those physical changes yourself. But it's very similar with our mind. We talked about the subconscious mind before. It's there when we were first born, and there's an intelligence within that. So we absorb all of this, and that's why we're generally like the patterns that we grew up with, like our parents or again caregivers who were around the most. So yeah, most people are very much in their head because that's how everyone else is around them, and that's how the society is around them. But it doesn't have to be that way, and I think it is much more of a Western culture
Mhm.
experience, like we are in America. But in Eastern cultures, this is a bit different, I would say. There's still challenges with that, but more likely it's like the Western part of our world or the more modern world, because we're taught, or at least just constantly brought out of our body and into our mind and into the world, like looking around us and outside of us versus going within. And it's uncomfortable actually to be with ourselves in the body for many, many, many other reasons we could talk about, a lot of trauma and things that
Yeah.
happen to us in our life, but it's the way. In fact, there's actually a great book that even states the obstacle is the way. And that is the truth for us too, that the obstacle of going within our body and actually being more at ease within our body, it's usually the way as well to liberate ourselves.
Oh, I love that. Now, so that's just part of the growing process that you move out of that alpha state, or do you still we still
Yes.
go in, we still do the alpha state occasionally, right?
Yep. Oh, 100%, especially in like deep meditation or if you actually have a hypnosis session for sure. But yeah, the major dominant vibration of our brain or the brain waves that we operate from, it's usually beta. But gamma, it'd be interesting for you to potentially look at this. And also myself, I haven't actually had a brain scan done, but I would imagine that I sometimes seep into gamma, and gamma brain waves are the highest vibration, which is way too quick, usually for good thought or constructive or creative thought. It's like hyperactiveness in essence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Let me actually look it up really quick because
What do
the
we use
different
gamma
brain.
for? Is that for flight or fight? I mean, is it when we're at that real?
Yeah, it could be. So there's gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Delta and theta are usually where we're sleeping, but alpha is like the next a rung up about that. Then beta is where we're normally hanging out with, but then gamma is the highest. Um, Let me look into that really quick because I honestly I don't have this like memorized
No,
exactly.
no, that's fine.
But yeah, so one article I just looked up: heightened perception, learning, problem solving tasks, cognitive processing. That's gamma. But the beta is usually associated with awakeness, alert, consciousness, thinking, and excitement. Um, yeah, but then the alpha, as I've been mentioning, where kids are usually, it's physically and mentally relaxed. But that'd be
Oh, so
actually a good thought.
physically and mentally, they said. It's
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, because there's a body mind connection. I'm assuming that they're speaking to that probably.
I do a yin yoga and we do a nidra
Nice.
meditation.
Yoga Nidra is great.
Yes, and it's really relaxing your body and your mind, but you're not asleep. People think you're sleeping. You're not sleeping.
Yeah.
It's tricky because you
Yeah.
want to sleep.
Right. And you could potentially fall asleep if you're not, really
Yeah, there's
keeping
always
yourself
one
there.
person in the room that starts snoring, but
Yes.
but when I'm in that place, I'll tell you what, it's ideas do pop into my mind.
Hmm.
I feel like it's my me so clearly. I'll be in nidra and I'm relaxed and suddenly it's like boom.
Yeah.
I
You
almost feel
catch
like
the
it
idea.
like yeah, it's like a voice saying, do this. You should be this is what and I'm like, no, no, no. And I'm like, shut up. Shut up.
Right.
Just shut up. I'm staying here.
Yeah. Do you at least this for me is what it helps with if I get an idea in like a deep meditation, I'll usually just take 5 to 10 seconds to promise myself that I'll come back to that idea.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, because then usually you'll remember that, and it's like you allow yourself to relax back into your meditation or that deep relaxation because you've made that commitment to yourself. It's like that was a great idea. I love it. Thank you. I'll see you later. And
Yeah.
you come back to the state.
Well, it's interesting. So let's talk about that. When I
Yeah.
when I painted, I started realizing that there was this place of non-thinking, relaxed body where I was painting. And what I tell my students is I want them to put a piece of paper next to them on their studio. And when that idea comes to you, I call it a parking lot.
Nice.
Reach over and just write it down. Call mom, but
Yep.
go right back. Go right back to the creative flow that you're in.
Mm,
So it's like you're saying, I'll come back to you. I'm putting you away. I'm not forgetting you, but I'm not gonna put you in here. I'm not gonna put
exactly.
you in the operating up right
Right.
now.
Yeah. And it's brilliant, honestly, that approach. Because thinking gets in the way of creative processes. Like you said, like you got to get out of your mind into your body so that you can allow creativity to flow. I mean, literally almost every creative describes the flow state that at least they've actually had experience with. It may not be a consistent experience, but it is something that is just so powerful and obviously creative when you're in that state. And that's usually when, you're not engaged consciously in thought. Like I was mentioning, like the beta wave vibration of our brain, like the brain waves.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So it's fascinating how these all see. I love this is the science and the feeling and the spirit. It's all comes together. The spirituality
right.
aspect of it.
Exactly.
Um, so do you teach that? Do you teach creativity in that sense or more creative?
It's yes, creativity in that sense, definitely, because the clients I tend to work with are creative people. It's not directly like your art, although it can
Mhm.
be. I also work with musicians, writers, but honestly, sometimes it could be creating what you would love in your life and your relationships, for example. So the process I walk my clients through is a way of getting clear on what they would love it to create in their life overall. Although again, it can include creative projects, but then how do we actually relax the body, get into that imaginal state, and then form our own thoughts and beliefs to actually align with that vision that we're working toward? So that's like generally my process in a nutshell.
Huh. Very interesting. It's very there's so much to So many
Talk about with
directions.
that. Yeah.
I know.
100%.
There's so many directions we could go. I had an interview. One of my earlier interviews is with a woman that focuses on it's called the Alexander technique, and it's about the body and how she teaches violinists and people that play music, because sometimes when your music isn't going well, it's because of the tension. Like if you have
Mm,
tension, if your dad always, and this is what literally she'll use as an example, if your instructor told you as a child that you always have to lean back like this and hold the violin like this, there's tension, and that tension is coming out in the music.
right.
So she teaches them new ways of standing, new ways of holding their body that affects their creative expression.
That's beautiful.
So I thought it was fascinating. He was in the 30s, the Alexander technique,
Wow.
very progressive at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds it.
and one of the things he talks about, which is really interesting, is I love this. You have to step into the uncomfortable, because see, it's comfortable for them to hold their bodies like that because when they were 6, that's what their instructor told them to do. And for 30 years, they've been doing that. So you have to be willing to go into an uncomfortable feeling to move past some bad behavior or bad habits,
Right.
you know, and that's hard for people to
Yeah, it
do.
is. Yeah. I think a big part of that is because we're trained to, or it's not even a training, it's actually a physiology. Going back to some of the science, that it's our biology and physiology that holds us back from actually trying something new, because it's the body interprets it as being unsafe. It's actually the mind too, but it's more of the unconscious mind, where we're not aware. And if we're not aware, or if we're not consciously choosing something new, then our brain and our body will always choose safety or protection. Even if it's something like this, where it's like, you'd want to improve your violin playing example, but your body won't allow you unless you're consciously deciding to change. But if you just try it without consciously making a decision and thinking differently, then the mind and the body will always choose to protect. In other words, go back to your comfort zone, what you know or what's normal, even though it's not life giving or not as liberating as it can be, which is such a paradox, right? Because
Yeah.
again, our body and our brain were hardwired for, I mean, tens of thousands of years to protect ourselves. And our brain hasn't developed much in the last, 10,000 years to really go beyond this very safety oriented kind of response.
Oh, I love this. So, most of us and most teachers, we focus on how your mind is holding you back.
Mm,
But what I heard you just say is that your body could be holding you back.
yes,
So we
100%.
need to unpack that. I love that. So,
Let's
and
do it.
how would that out picture? Like, um, if I'm trying to learn how to draw,
Mhm.
I can obviously see that my mind would say, well, that doesn't look good,
Yep.
and criticize it. Now, how would the body be holding me back from that? Like,
Well, think of it in this way. Our mind, just like we mentioned before, the mind body connection, those thoughts of, oh, this doesn't look good, or I've only, a thought of I've been doing this or this certain way, it has to be connected with some physical behavior. Like my favorite example of this, think of the way in which you wash your body when you take a shower. Literally, it's funny. I thought about this today when I took a shower this morning. I consciously took the bar soap, and instead of starting with my left arm, or sorry, my right hand to wash my left arm, I usually start with that. I literally thought, no, I'm going to do it differently. And I took the bar soap in my left hand, started to wash my right arm first. I sometimes do it just so that I switch my pattern of behavior in my body, because there's that known, uh, habit physically. It's not even a thought. It's more in the physiology, because again, we might have thought that way at one point, but it is now as like a more of like a physical form in our body that we're just so used to. So it's a way of shifting how you actually approach something physically. But if you don't do that, again, like, you usually stop by your thoughts, but it's actually not just your thoughts. It's really the habitual or muscle memory of your body is the best way of putting it.
well, oh wow, you just said a lot that I really
I
love.
did.
Okay, you did. So we talked earlier about how your mind and your body connect, and how your body is a receiver. It's a
Hmm.
receiver for your mind. It's almost like, you know, um, the microphone receives for the computer, right? It's the receiving sensitive part, but they go both ways. So if your mind is negative, it will outpicture in tension, hard strokes, shaking, whatever that may be, that would affect the physicality of what you're trying to do.
Right. Exactly.
And
But
then, so that was just one
go
thing.
ahead.
One of
Yes.
many things you said. So I love also, I did the same. It's so funny that you said that. A couple years ago, I remember I noticed that I always start shaving this side first. So I asked the
Mm.
listener, pay attention. Do you always shave the same way? Or, do you always brush your teeth on the same side? Do you start on the same side? And guarantee it, I do. I
Yep.
start on this side and then I move to this.
Yep.
But I'm favoring, when you talk about right brain and left brain, I'm favoring a side that you're right, just changing it can actually shift your mind.
Yes. In fact, not only can, it absolutely does. There's no way around it. Because think of it this way, since the mind body connection is now well proven, the mind does connect with the body, thoughts we think eventually become a part of the body in some form, but it's vice versa as well. We move the body in a different way, which I think is why I mentioned before that your work with your clients is so brilliant, that you have them loosen and move their body first. It then just elicits new thought, completely new thought that is novel to your experience than anything before. It has to. There's no other way around it because it's so inextricably connected. It cannot be disconnected. So there has to be some form of change.
I love that. So it's true. I stumbled upon that. So
Mm.
I started playing music when they draw, and that was a wonderful experience. But what I do at my retreat, one of the things I do, I think I mentioned this to you, is I have them stand in line. I don't know if I did or not. I have them stand in line, and the first person has to do some sort of motion, some silly motion, like, or
Right.
just shake. And then they walk the whole perimeter of the room, and everybody following them has to do the same thing.
Nice.
And so it's pushing them totally outside of their comfort zone because first they look silly. One guy
Mm-hmm.
said, one of the guys, he was like, this makes me look girly. And I'm like, I said to him, embrace your girly, man. Just
Yeah.
embrace it. Embrace it. Because, one of the women was doing something silly and he had to do it. He had to. And that's hard. We are patterned. Women, and you know what? Likewise, some guy might go like this. And
Mm.
the women in the group are like,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I'm afraid to claim that. Well, oh, it's giving me goosebumps. I love this, but it really does shift them. And so what happened was, Kevin, they would come around and I had a piece of paper and they do a motion, they draw something. So I had some markers and color, they could pick whatever they want and they do a martian. Then they go to the back of the line and the next person does something new and everybody follows them. So at the end, everybody has hit that canvas once. They can erase what was there. They can change. There's no rule. Like they can add to it, they can subtract, they can cover up what someone else just did. Really, there's a whole theory behind that I could
Mm.
tell you about. But what happens is it's so much fun. And people just, because I play music when you do it, because I think it lets people loosen up. But I started noticing how much, like you said, that movement,
Mm.
and I had never played with movement. I always play with the mind, right? I'm always like, how do
Right.
you think? If you have people that are resistant to thinking a new thought,
Mm-hmm.
go through their body. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like if
100%.
they can't think of how to be more aggressive, they won't be more aggressive in their mind. Make them be more aggressive physically.
There you go. It's a great shift.
Yeah. So it's so exciting. Or the other way around, if they can't do something physically, make them think it. But I think we you're right. In our society, we're so up in our heads, you know. Even
Too
and
much.
especially religions have pushed us up in we are not, our bodies are they're alien evil things that want us to
Mm-hmm.
do things that aren't approved of, right?
Right.
Whatever, through sexual repression, identity repression, we're all up here, but we're the whole thing,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that last point because it is probably another reason why in our society we've been so held back, and so many of these different scientific proofs are now liberating so many of us that if we actually tune into this, the truth is being revealed more and more about how, again, our body, our physical body, operates and how our mind operates, how they connect. But then also, I mean, spiritual expression comes through our body. It has to. There's no other way. How else would something come into form if it is not through our own mind and body or through the mind of God, for example? Like it has to move through some medium to actually have some physical expression. And so I think the work you're doing is brilliant for what you shared.
Oh, thanks. Well, I love what you're doing. You know, it's interesting when you think about when I encounter someone that has, and I did, trust me, for most of my life, I had resistance to religion.
Mm,
But if you look at it this way and you say, well, man has been doing some sort of religion for thousands, as long as man has been on this planet, they seem to be have doing some sort of religion. So there are habits and traditions that might be good for you in that religion,
yes.
you know. And you know, when you think about like dancing and moving, there are some religions where there's the freedom or chanting around a fire. It's all through your body.
Yes.
It's the emotional. You move your body and you feel connected to something greater than you.
Exactly. Well
So is
said.
yeah, it's a wonderful paradigm, and that I do think it's so nice to see that maybe we are breaking free of that, you know.
I think so. Yeah, because it's fascinating. I think the way in which we're breaking through is kind of it seems like a backdoor approach where it's like, oh, we want to understand the nature of the universe through very scientific, logical, like here's the proof. And yet now it's opening up this whole new world, especially again through quantum physics, that it's like we actually can't prove a lot of these things. And currently, right now, with our current scientific method and instruments and trying to figure things out. But there's this whole realm of mystery that now is being opened up through those kinds of sciences. But I think that is also starting to open up our minds to realize that it's way more than just this very mechanicalistic viewpoint of the world. That consciousness has a huge play in reality, and again, that's more and more being proven through current scientific experiments. But yeah, it's such a paradox though, because again, scientific theory and proof, it's very like linear, logical, like
Yeah,
trying to like nail something down when what's actually happening is more and more mystery is coming out of it.
and that's really throwing them off.
Yes, it is. Although, thank God there are scientists, especially the quantum physicists, who are like willing to play in those spaces that it's like, wow, I don't understand this, but this is fascinating. I want to stay with it.
Yeah. I love that. And you were talking about consciousness, and I want to go back to what you said earlier, the consciousness of your whole body, that there is a
Mm,
consciousness within every cell. Every single cell, right, is a thinking entity. Is that what I'm
I
hearing?
believe that's what I believe. I don't know actually if there's certain scientific proofs that show that, but let me share some scientific backing of why I've come to that conclusion over my years of study. That, and this comes from my background as a scientist when I was studying in pharmacy school. Um, the just deep intelligence of even just one cell, and the example I want to give is of how DNA is replicated. There's something called RNA, and it's the part of DNA that can be replicated so that as we grow new cells in our body, which we do that every single day, there's a new cell that is created as others die. We have to make new DNA, and that DNA is perfectly replicated just so intrinsically, and that we don't even think of that. We don't consciously think, all right, I'm going to form a new cell today. Like it just happens, right? Well, how? Well, it has to come from some intelligence, right? And the highest form of intelligence that as we as humans know is thought. And because I mean, think about it. Go figure, think about it. But we had to think to create anything, right? Like let's just take for example, like a very high powered technological piece of equipment we have. Let's call it our smartphones or our laptops that we can get on the internet. Incredibly powerful, and all the code that goes into that, highly intelligent. That came from a thought. All of what we've created in human reality today is minuscule compared to the intelligence of even just one cell in our body and how DNA is replicated so that we can form a new cell. That's irrefutable. Like you can look that up and like even just ask any scientist that is like, yep, that is even more intelligent or even smarter than what we can create as humans so far. It's one cell. So to me, that like process of reasoning is like, yes, there has to be some level of thought or at least intelligence in each cell.
Yeah, I did read it recently in a book. Oh, I wish I could pull it. I'd read so much about talking about the intelligence. Here's something it was in the same article that I read. It was talking about how plants grow,
Mm.
And they used to realize, they used to think, this is what I wish I could quote what it was from. Roots would grow and they hit a rock and then it forces them to go down. Well, they started studying and realizing that the root grows, but it starts going down before it hits the rock.
Wow.
That the tip of the root is actually sensing a wall and going around it. That the thought, the mind, the brain of a plant is in its tips of its roots, not in the heart, not, not up here, but in the tips of its roots.
Interesting. I love that. That's such a good analogy.
And it was like, and I love I'm a big nature buff, and I'm like, what? No, no, no. The roots hit something and they force it around. No, no, no. They see it and they go. In fact, try looking at an orchid you might have on your windowsill. It will send the plant out, and when it sees the window, it doesn't hit the window. It goes really close, and then it tries to go around it. It's trying to go
Mm.
around the window. It's fascinating.
It's incredible.
The intelligence in things that we don't think have intelligence.
Right. Yeah, the
Yeah.
plants are very intelligent. I'm so glad you brought that up too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, think one final, just piggybacking on that, just how like, that's a plant. We think of that as a lower form of life, yet the intelligence within that. So you think that, I mean, for us being, at least currently to our knowledge, humans are God's highest form of creation for what we know of. So like, you think that our intelligence would be more than an intelligence of a plant, yet the plant is extremely intelligent. So like, what are we then in comparison to that? So
Yeah,
again, just to like build more of that knowing that like, all right, there's some intelligence that we're working with.
I've already changed that shift in my head. I believe there's that intelligence in everything. It's just
Mm,
everything. It's in this table, it's in the sky, it's in the
yes,
evolution, it's in, it's all intelligent. It's just I'm not aware. I
agreed.
I don't get
Yes,
it, but it's
I
there.
I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with that too.
So we're winding this down, and sometime we'll have to talk about. I have been playing with Chat GPT. I don't know if you use Chat GPT.
Hmm.
I would love to have a conversation with you about that and the intelligence behind Chat GPT. But I
Mm.
love this. So, is there anything else you want, that you want to sum up here about the body, or that we touched on that you want to repeat, or
Yeah, this is a point that I always love to end off any conversation with. It definitely absolutely connects with our conversation we've had. But I personally believe, whatever term you want to call it, but I personally believe that there is a God. And not only believe, I like to say I actually know, because belief means that like there's something that you're like conjuring within yourself to actually like connect with. But I believe it's an innate just beingness. So I know it. I know there is God. And I believe it for everyone, whether you want to call it God, source, spirit, the universe, infinite intelligence. There's some intelligence within all life. And therefore, the the dream that you have on your heart as a listener, or create something you want to create, that is absolutely possible for you, no matter what you think. If there's some doubt or concern in your mind of if it being possible, that's okay, but it doesn't take away the actual truth of your nature that you can create whatever you want. And that goes back to what we've been speaking about this entire conversation, that we are intelligent, whether we realize it or not. Our body's intelligent. And when we start to work with how life works, how our body works, how our mind works, and get past our own, limitations, what we impose on ourselves, then there is this force of life, this energy of life that comes through you. I mean, it's life itself. Again, call it God, source, spirit, the universe, but it is highly intelligent. It wants us all to prosper and grow and create something new. I think that's why we're here. So I believe it's our soul's purpose to be here to create something new, whatever form that might be. It could be as simple as creating a beautiful conversation with a neighbor. It doesn't have to be some groundbreaking, earth shattering difference in the world. Just start small and it usually does expand.
I totally align with that. Totally agree with that. And yeah, you said something earlier there just now about how, if you're limiting yourself, trust that you can do it. And then I was going to say, and go out and run, or, or,
Yes.
move your
Yes.
body, right? If you feel like if you feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do this right now, go do some push-ups.
Exactly.
It might help, right? Yeah, it
I
will help.
agree.
It
It
will help.
will. It will.
I don't even
It's
have to say
the
might.
Yeah, just a final point. I mean, I think most people have had this experience where, like, if you have been putting off like going to the gym or doing some exercise, it's like the thought is like, oh, I don't want to. But almost every time afterward, it's like, oh my God, what was I waiting for? like you just naturally feel better. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this every day. But then like we get caught in the old thought again, so it's a practice. There's no one being perfect at this, but it definitely does help.
Okay. Well, thanks. I want to remind the listeners that you do have a podcast called Science and Spirituality. It's so funny. I had a friend of mine, a listener of mine in Ireland, email me and say, I needed a podcast. I was going to listen to you, but I decided to listen to Science and Spirituality. And guess who was on there?
Nice. Yes.
That's what she said to me. She goes, guess who was on there? I said, that is too funny. So I
That's
love
awesome.
your talks. Your brother and you are quite abundant with knowledge and information. So I encourage the listeners to check it out. It's actually one of my favorites that I've been on, so
Thank you.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate that. And just to let your listeners know, instead of like trying to search to find your episode, we number our episodes. So your episode on our podcast is number 257. Exactly.
You got a good memory.
Oh, that
Yeah.
wasn't memory. I looked it up. Technology is amazing.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. So, hey, listeners, thanks for following me. Go and follow this podcast as well. Share it with your friends. You can forward this. If you go to the upper right screen of your phone, you can actually forward this interview to your friends and say, see, I told you. I told you. So, everybody, have a great day and continue to be a spiritual artist. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.